Welcome back to Idioms for IELTS, and we're going to look at the environment now. So let's go. As I always, I'll remind you that in speaking, idioms can make you or help you sound much more natural and expressive. However, when we look at writing, we've got to change these idioms to something more formal. So on the one hand, we've got the idioms and the informality. On the other, we've got formal words instead. So in this lesson, we're going to look at 5 environment idioms and then show them in speaking and writing. So, most of you know that in the speaking test, you could be asked about climate change or recycling or environmental protection, etc. Also, in writing, you may be asked about these things or global warming, renewable energy, environmental policies. Let's look at some idioms to discuss these topics. All right, so here we go. Here are today's idioms. We have the first one, a drop in the ocean. That means it's a very small amount compared to what is needed. So we need a lot, but we only got a drop in the ocean, a little bit. So in speaking, you may say, recycling one bottle feels like a drop in the ocean. It's very, very little. But in writing, how would you reformulate the writing? So, individual recycling efforts make a minimal impact compared to the scale of the problem, a minimal impact. So, it's like a drop in the ocean. The tip of the iceberg. What does that mean? It means a small, visible part of a bigger problem. So you imagine an iceberg, you've got the small part on the surface of the water. Underneath, the iceberg is much bigger. So that's a small, visible part of a bigger problem. You may say in speaking, plastic waste is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to environmental damage. But in writing, you have to change that. So you may say plastic pollution represents only a small portion of the broader environmental crisis. And again, like a drop in the ocean, you would only really use this in speaking. Next one, in hot water, which means you're in trouble. To be in hot water, to be in trouble. So, in a speaking example, you may say factories that break pollution laws can end up in hot water with the government, in trouble. But in writing, you would say factories that violate environmental regulations may face legal penalties. All right. And again, the idiom itself, in hot water, is informal. Next one, the lion's share. That means the largest part. The lion gets the largest part. So in speaking, you may say the lion's share of pollution comes from the transport industry. But in writing, you would say the transport sector is responsible for the majority of pollution. And the last one is to make waves. To make waves. That means to cause a lot of discussion or change. So, speaking example, the new climate policy made waves among environmentalists. It caused a lot of discussion among environmentalists. But if you change this to writing, which you need to do, then you may say something like this: the new climate policy generated significant debate among environmental organizations. So that's much more formal. So this time, let's look at a speaking part 2. And the question reads like this: describe an environmental problem in your country, very basic one. Sample spoken answer could be air pollution is a major issue. The lion's share of it comes from cars and buses. People think recycling will solve it, but that's just a drop in the ocean compared to the changes we really need. So the lion's share, most of it, comes from cars and buses. People think recycling will solve it, but that's really just a small piece of what is needed compared to the changes that we really need. So you could pause the video or do it later to describe an environmental problem using at least 2 of the idioms and look at the examples I've given you for each and try to use them. Here's a writing task 2 question. Many believe individuals can do little to improve the environment, while others think everyone should take action. Discuss both views, give your opinion. So the informal answer would be something like individual recycling is just a drop in the ocean, it's just a small piece of what is needed. However, we cannot say this when we're writing, so we need to be much more formal. So formally, we may say, while individual recycling is beneficial, its overall effect is minimal compared to the broader environmental challenges we face. Again, for the writing task too, you could do the same. You choose at least one idiom from today and rewrite it for academic writing. Now remember, you have 5 idioms in this video, 5 in another. You don't need all of them. You just choose the ones you think you can use. So you get 5 today. Which one is the easiest one for you to use? Is it, for example, a drop in the ocean? So recycling one bottle feels like a drop in the ocean. Do you remember what that was for writing? How would you phrase this for writing? Let's have a look. Individual recycling efforts make a minimal impact compared to the scale of the problem. You may prefer the tip of the iceberg. So in speaking, the example could be plastic waste is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to environmental damage. Do you remember the writing version of this, the more formal version of this? So don't look back. Just can you remember how we rephrased it? Plastic pollution represents only a small portion of the broader environmental problem. So is tip of the iceberg easier to use than a drop in the ocean? To be in hot water. Speaking example, factories that break pollution laws can end up in hot water with the government in trouble. Do you remember the writing? Reformulated, more formal writing version of this sentence? Remember which words we changed? All right, let's have a look. Factories that violate environmental regulations may face legal penalties. So that's a much more formal way of saying that they're going to be in trouble. The lion's share. So you remember what the lion's share means? The example was the lion's share of pollution comes from the transport industry. So how did we rephrase this to make it more formal and academic for the writing? Do you remember? The transport sector is responsible for the majority of pollution. So that's just my way of reformulating them. You can reformulate and make them more formal than this. That's fine. But you're trying to say what the idiom means in a formal way. And we had to make waves. Speaking example, the new climate policy made waves among environmentalists. So what did that mean? And how did we rephrase it more formally? Do you remember? The new climate policy generated significant debate among environmental organizations. So, this is again the difference between informal speaking and more formal academic writing. In the informal speaking, we use the idiom, then we have to start to change it to make it more formal in the writing. Anyway, so which one is easier for you to use? Is it a drop in the ocean, tip of the iceberg, in hot water, the lion's share, or to make waves? Which one do you think you could try to use and it would not be so difficult? Okay, and as I always remind you, they're very good for speaking, these idioms, but most of them are only for speaking, but then you have to change the sentence and make it more formal for writing. If you want to do more at home, you could record the speaking answer to a part 2 question on the environment and try to use at least 2 of these idioms. Or you could rewrite this sentence. The lion's share of pollution comes from private cars. Should be quite an easy one, I think. All right, so that's video number 6, quick videos on idioms for IELTS. And next time, we're going to look at government and society. What idioms could we use there? So until then, see you next time.